In the vibrant town of Kijiji, nestled deep in the heart of Africa, lived an elderly woman named Alice. Known for her kind heart and infectious laughter, Alice was a beloved figure in her community. Every morning, she would stroll through the bustling market, greeting vendors and helping neighbors with their daily tasks. One sunny afternoon, while sipping her favorite hibiscus tea under the shade of a baobab tree, Alice decided to try her luck and bought a lottery ticket from a passing vendor. She had never done this before, but felt a strange sense of excitement as she held the ticket in her wrinkled hands. Days passed, and Alice almost forgot about the ticket until one evening, while listening to the radio, she heard the announcer reading out the winning numbers. Her heart skipped a beat as she realized that she had all the matching numbers. She had won the lottery. The news spread quickly through Kijiji. Everyone was thrilled for Alice. The next morning, with a mixture of nerves and excitement, she set out to the lottery office in the nearby city of Mbale to claim her prize. The journey was long, but Alice enjoyed the scenic views of lush green hills and winding rivers. When she arrived at the lottery office, a cheerful clerk named Kofi greeted her. "Congratulations, Mama Alice. Let's get you your prize," he said with a wide smile. As Kofi led Alice to a small, dimly lit room, he explained the process of verifying her ticket. Suddenly, a tall man in a sharp suit entered the room. "Good afternoon, Madam Alice," he said, extending his hand. "My name is Mr. Okello, the manager here." "There seems to be a slight problem." Alice's heart sank. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. Mr. Okello cleared his throat. "It appears there was an error in our system. While you did win the lottery, the amount you are to receive is much larger than we initially thought." Alice's eyes widened in disbelief. "Larger? How much larger?" Before Mr. Okello could answer, the lights flickered and the room fell into darkness. Alice felt a shiver run down her spine. The air grew thick with tension. Suddenly, the door burst open, and a group of men wearing masks stormed in, shouting and brandishing weapons. "Everyone on the ground!" one of them yelled. Alice dropped to her knees, her heart pounding in her chest. The masked men seemed to be searching for something or someone. As chaos ensued, Alice noticed Kofi slipping a small, folded piece of paper into her hand. "Trust no one," he whispered urgently before being dragged away by one of the masked men. Alice clutched the paper tightly, her mind racing with questions. Who were these men? What did Kofi mean? And what was written on the paper? As the room echoed with shouts and the sound of breaking glass, Alice realized that winning the lottery was just the beginning of a much bigger adventure. Amid the chaos, Alice managed to crawl to a corner of the room, clutching the small piece of paper Kofi had given her. The masked men were ransacking the office, searching through drawers and cabinets. Mr. Okello and the other staff were lying on the ground, terrified and helpless. Alice unfolded the paper with trembling hands. It read, "Find Makena at the old market. She will help you." Just as she finished reading, one of the masked men spotted her. "What are you doing over there, old woman?" he barked, advancing towards her. Alice quickly slipped the note into her pocket and tried to appear as harmless as possible. "Please, I don't know what's happening," she said, her voice shaking. The man stared at her for a moment, then seemed to lose interest. He turned back to his companions, who were now dragging Mr. Okello to his feet. "Tell us where the money is, or else," one of them threatened. Mr. Okello, visibly frightened, stammered, "I don't know what you're talking about. The prize money is in the safe, but I need the keys." The leader of the masked men snarled and shoved him towards the office door. "Show us." Now, as they moved towards the office, Alice saw her chance. She quietly got to her feet and slipped out of the room, careful not to draw any attention. The hallways were empty, the office eerily quiet except for the distant sounds of the intruders. Alice hurried outside, the bright sunlight momentarily blinding her. She took a deep breath and started walking briskly towards the old market. She had to find Makena, whoever she was, and figure out what was going on. The old market was a place Alice knew well. It was once the heart of Kijiji, but over the years it had fallen into disrepair. Still, a few vendors and artisans remained, clinging to the past glory of the market. As she entered the market, Alice scanned the area, looking for any sign of Makena. She spotted an elderly woman selling handmade jewelry under a tattered awning. "Excuse me," Alice said, approaching her. "Do you know someone named Makena?" The woman looked up, her eyes sharp and intelligent. "Who wants to know?" "My name is Alice. Kofi sent me," she replied, hoping this was the right person. The woman's expression softened. "Ah, Kofi. Follow me." Makena led Alice to a small, hidden alley behind the market stalls. She opened a door that led into a cozy, dimly lit room filled with various trinkets and artifacts. "Sit down," Makena said, gesturing to a wooden chair. "Tell me everything." Alice recounted the events at the lottery office, the unexpected prize amount, and the sudden appearance of the masked men. She handed Makena the note Kofi had given her. Makena read the note and nodded thoughtfully. "Kofi was right to send you to me. There's more at play here than you realize." "What do you mean?" Alice asked, confused. Makena leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "That lottery ticket you have, it's part of something much bigger. The prize money is connected to a hidden treasure, one that many powerful people have been searching for." Alice's eyes widened. "A treasure? But I just wanted to claim my prize money." "I know," Makena said gently. "But now you're caught up in this, and those men won't stop until they get what they want. We need to find the treasure before they do." Alice felt a mixture of fear and determination. She had never imagined her life would take such a turn, but she couldn't back down now. She had to see this through. "Where do we start?" Alice asked, her voice steady. Makena smiled. "We start with finding the first clue, hidden right here in Kijiji. And I have a feeling you're the key to unlocking it." Alice took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "Where do we find this clue?" she asked. Makena stood up and reached for a worn leather book on a nearby shelf. She flipped through the pages, each one filled with hand-drawn maps and scribbled notes. "According to my research," Makena said, pointing to a map of Kijiji, "the first clue is hidden in the old library, which has been abandoned for years." Alice remembered the old library. It was a grand building that had once been the pride of Kijiji, but now it stood in ruins, overtaken by vines and time. "The library is dangerous," Alice said. "It's falling apart." Makena nodded. "Yes, but we have no choice. We must go there and find the clue. It's the only way to stay ahead of those men." Alice agreed, and together they set out for the old library. The streets of Kijiji were busy with people going about their daily lives, unaware of the dangerous adventure Alice was embarking on. As they approached the library, Alice felt a sense of nostalgia mixed with apprehension. The once majestic entrance was now covered in thick ivy, and the windows were shattered. They carefully made their way inside, stepping over debris and broken furniture. "Where do we start looking?" Alice asked, her voice echoing in the vast, empty space. Makena pulled out the map and pointed to a section labeled Archives. "The clue should be hidden somewhere in the archives room," she said. "Let's go." They navigated through the dark, dusty corridors until they found a door marked Archives. Pushing it open, they were met with rows of old shelves filled with books and documents. The air was thick with the smell of aged paper. "We need to find a book with a red cover," Makena said, scanning the shelves. It contains the first clue. Alice began searching, running her fingers along the spines of the books. After what felt like hours, she finally spotted a book with a faded red cover hidden behind a stack of newspapers. She carefully pulled it out and handed it to Makena. Makena opened the book and flipped through the pages until she found a piece of parchment tucked inside. She carefully unfolded it, revealing a handwritten note and a small, intricate key. The note says, "To unlock the past, you must find the present within the lion's den," Makena read aloud. "And this key must be used to open something significant." Alice frowned. The lion's den. What could that mean? Makena looked thoughtful. "There's a place in Kijiji called Lion's Den. It's an old, abandoned zoo that was closed down years ago. That must be where we need to go next." Before they could leave, they heard footsteps echoing through the library. Alice's heart raced. "They're here," she whispered. Makena quickly put the book and parchment into her bag. "We need to get out of here now." They carefully retraced their steps, trying to avoid making any noise. As they reached the entrance, they saw the masked men entering the library, searching for them. "Over here," Makena whispered, leading Alice to a side door that led into a narrow alley. They slipped out quietly and made their way to the crowded streets, blending in with the bustling crowd. "We need to get to Lion's Den before they do," Makena said, urgency in her voice. Alice nodded, determination in her eyes. "Let's go." As they made their way to the abandoned zoo, Alice couldn't shake the feeling that their adventure was just beginning. They had the first clue and the key, but there was still so much they didn't know. But one thing was certain: Alice was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Alice and Makena hurried through the winding streets of Kijiji, the sun beginning to set behind the hills. The air grew cooler, and the sounds of the market faded as they approached the outskirts of town where the abandoned zoo, Lion's Den, was located. Overgrown with wild vegetation, the zoo had an eerie, deserted feel to it. "We need to find the lion's enclosure," Makena said, her eyes scanning the area for any landmarks. "That's where we'll likely find the next clue." They carefully made their way through the tall grass and crumbling pathways, avoiding the rusted fences and broken cages. As they approached the center of the zoo, they saw a large, dilapidated structure that once housed the lions. The entrance was barred by a heavy iron gate, which was partially ajar. Alice and Makena squeezed through the opening, stepping into the dark, musty enclosure. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and their footsteps echoed in the empty space. In the middle of the room, they saw an old, ornate chest, covered in dust and cobwebs. "This must be it," Alice said, her voice barely above a whisper. Makena nodded and pulled out the small key they had found in the library. She inserted it into the lock of the chest and turned it. With a soft click, the chest opened, revealing a collection of ancient scrolls, a map, and a golden medallion with intricate carvings. Makena carefully unrolled one of the scrolls and began to read. This scroll details the history of the hidden treasure. It says the treasure is a collection of ancient artifacts that hold great power and wisdom, hidden away by the ancestors to protect them from falling into the wrong hands. Alice picked up the medallion and examined it. "This must be part of the treasure," she said, feeling a strange energy emanating from it. "But why did Kofi send us here? What does this have to do with the lottery?" Makena continued reading the scrolls, piecing together the story. "It seems the lottery was a ruse, a way to find someone who could help uncover the treasure. The winning ticket was a signal to the keepers of the treasure that the time had come to reveal it." Before they could fully process this information, they heard voices approaching. The masked men had followed them to Lion's Den. "We have to hide," Alice said urgently. They quickly looked around and found a small, hidden compartment behind a broken statue of a lion. They squeezed into the tight space just as the men entered the enclosure, their flashlights sweeping the area. "Search everywhere," the leader commanded. "They have to be here." Alice and Makena held their breath, hoping they wouldn't be discovered. The men rummaged through the room, overturning debris and shining their lights into every corner. Just when it seemed like they might find the hidden compartment, one of the men called out, "Over here, I found something." The leader walked over, and Alice peeked through a crack to see what they had found. One of the men held up the map from the chest. "This map leads to the next location," he said. "We need to follow it and find the treasure before they do." The leader nodded. "Let's move out." As the men left the enclosure, Alice and Makena waited until they were sure the coast was clear. They emerged from their hiding place, relieved but more determined than ever. "We can't let them get to the treasure," Alice said, her eyes filled with resolve. Makena agreed. "We need to follow them and find the treasure first. It's our only chance to protect it." With the scrolls and medallions safely tucked away, they set out to follow the men, using their knowledge of Kijiji and the map they had glimpsed to stay one step ahead. The race to uncover the hidden treasure had truly begun, and Alice knew that their journey would test their courage, wit, and trust in one another. As night fell, the streets of Kijiji grew quieter, the air filled with the sounds of nocturnal animals and distant drums. Alice and Makena moved stealthily through the shadows, keeping a safe distance behind the masked men who were now their unwitting guides to the next clue. Makena had memorized the map's general direction, and they followed the men through a dense forest on the outskirts of Kijiji. The path was narrow and overgrown, making it difficult to navigate. They had to be careful not to make any noise that might alert the men to their presence. After what felt like hours, the masked men arrived at a clearing where an ancient, overgrown temple stood. The temple, built from large stone blocks and adorned with intricate carvings, was a testament to the ingenuity and artistry of their ancestors. It was both awe-inspiring and intimidating, especially in the moonlight. The men stopped and set up camp a short distance from the temple entrance. "We'll rest here and search the temple at first light," the leader said. "Keep watch. We can't let anyone get ahead of us." Alice and Makena hid behind a large tree, watching the men settle in. "We need to get inside the temple before they do," Alice whispered. "But how do we get past them?" Makena looked thoughtful. "There's a small stream nearby that runs under the temple. I remember my grandmother telling me stories about a secret entrance through the waterway." Alice nodded. "Let's find it." They quietly made their way towards the stream, careful to avoid being seen by the guards. The stream was shallow but wide, and they could hear the soft gurgle of water as it flowed over the rocks. Following the stream, they found a small, hidden opening in the temple wall, just as Makena's grandmother had described. They slipped through the narrow entrance and found themselves in a dark, damp tunnel. The air was thick with moisture, and the sound of dripping water echoed around them. Alice pulled out a small flashlight from her bag, and they carefully made their way through the tunnel. After a few minutes, they emerged into a larger chamber within the temple. The walls were covered in ancient carvings, depicting scenes of village life, battles, and ceremonies. In the center of the room stood a pedestal with a carved stone tablet resting on top. Makena approached the tablet and read the inscription aloud. "To unlock the final path, one must solve the riddle of the past. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 legs in the evening?" Alice thought for a moment. "I know this one. It's a human. In the morning of life, a baby crawls on all 4s. At noon, an adult walks on 2 legs, and in the evening of life, an elderly person uses a cane, walking on 3 legs." As she spoke, the stone tablet began to glow, and a hidden door in the wall slowly opened, revealing a staircase descending into the depths of the temple. "Well done," Makena said, impressed. Let's go. They descended the staircase, their hearts pounding with anticipation. At the bottom, they found a large, ornate door with symbols carved into its surface. The door seemed to be pulsing with an otherworldly energy, and Alice felt the medallion in her bag grow warm. Makena took out the medallion and placed it into a corresponding slot on the door. With a soft click, the door swung open, revealing a chamber filled with golden artifacts, ancient scrolls, and precious jewels. The treasure was beyond anything they could have imagined. But before they could fully take in the sight, they heard footsteps approaching. The masked men had discovered the secret entrance and were closing in fast. "We have to protect the treasure," Alice said, grabbing a nearby staff adorned with mystical symbols. "We can't let it fall into their hands." Makena nodded, picking up a ceremonial dagger from the treasure pile. "We stand our ground here. This is where we make our stand." As the masked men entered the chamber, their eyes widened with greed at the sight of the treasure. "This is it," the leader said, stepping forward. "Take everything." But Alice and Makena stood firm, their resolve unshakable. The treasure was more than just wealth, it was a legacy, a history that needed to be preserved. They were ready to defend it with everything they had. The confrontation was inevitable, and the air was thick with tension. Alice felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. She knew that, together, she and Makena could overcome any challenge. The adventure had led them to this moment, and they were ready to face whatever came next. The leader of the masked men stepped forward, a sinister smile spreading across his face. "You two really think you can stop us?" he sneered. "Hand over the medallion and step aside." Alice tightened her grip on the staff, feeling its energy course through her. "This treasure doesn't belong to you," she said firmly. "It's a part of our history and our legacy." Makena, holding the ceremonial dagger, added, "We'll protect it, no matter the cost." The leader's smile faded, replaced by a look of anger. "Very well. Have it your way." He signaled to his men, who began to advance. Alice and Makena stood their ground, ready for the inevitable clash. As the first of the masked men lunged towards them, Alice swung the staff, emitting a burst of light that sent him sprawling backwards. Makena moved swiftly, using the dagger to deflect another attack. The chamber echoed with the sounds of struggle, but Alice and Makena fought with determination and skill. The staff's power seemed to guide Alice's movements, and she felt a newfound strength within her. Makena's agility and precision kept their attackers at bay. Despite their efforts, the masked men were relentless, and their numbers seemed overwhelming. Just as Alice began to feel the weight of exhaustion, a familiar voice echoed through the chamber. "Stop this madness." Kofi appeared at the entrance, flanked by several villagers from Kijiji. "This is not the way," he shouted, stepping forward. "The treasure belongs to all of us, and it must be protected, not plundered." The masked men hesitated, unsure of how to react. The leader glared at Kofi, his eyes filled with rage. "You think you can just waltz in here and stop us?" Kofi stood his ground, his voice steady. "Yes, because we stand together as a community. This treasure is our heritage, and we will defend it as one." The villagers, armed with makeshift weapons, stepped forward, forming a protective circle around Alice and Makena. The masked men, seeing the united front, began to retreat. The leader, realizing he was outnumbered and outmatched, snarled in frustration. "This isn't over," he spat, before signaling his men to withdraw. They quickly disappeared into the shadows, leaving the chamber in an uneasy silence. Alice, breathing heavily, looked at Kofi with gratitude. "Thank you," she said. "We couldn't have done it without you." Kofi smiled warmly. "We are stronger together. The treasure is safe, for now." Makena sheathed the ceremonial dagger and approached the treasure. "We need to ensure it's protected," she said. "This can't happen again." Kofi nodded. "We'll organize a council to safeguard the treasure. It's time for the village to reclaim its heritage and protect it for future generations." As the villagers began to discuss plans, Alice felt a deep sense of relief and accomplishment. The treasure was safe, and the community had come together to defend it. She knew their journey was far from over, but for now, they had won a significant victory. Alice approached Makena, who was examining the ancient scrolls. "What's next?" she asked. Makena looked up, a glint of determination in her eyes. "We need to understand the full extent of this treasure and its history. There are still many secrets to uncover." Alice nodded, feeling a sense of purpose. "I'm ready." Together, they would continue their adventure, exploring the depths of their heritage and protecting the legacy of their ancestors. The journey had only just begun, and Alice knew that with the support of her friends and community, they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the first light of dawn filtered into the chamber, Alice felt a renewed sense of hope. The unexpected twists and turns of the past few days had brought her closer to her roots and to the people she cared about. And with each step, she was discovering not just the hidden treasures of her land, but the strength within herself to protect them. The villagers of Kijiji worked together tirelessly over the following days. They formed a council to protect the treasure, ensuring its safety and security. Alice and Makena became respected figures within the community, their bravery and determination inspiring others. As the days turned into weeks, Alice and Makena delved deeper into the history of the treasure. They uncovered more scrolls and artifacts, each piece revealing a bit more about the rich heritage of their ancestors. The knowledge they gained helped them understand the significance of the treasure and the responsibility they had to protect it. One evening, as Alice and Makena were studying an ancient map, Kofi entered the room with a smile on his face. "We have visitors," he said. Curious, Alice and Makena followed him to the village square. There, they found a group of historians and archaeologists from the capital city. They had heard about the discovery and had come to help document and preserve the treasure. The leader of the group, Dr. Adebeo, approached Alice and Makena. "We are honored to be here," he said. "The work you have done is remarkable. We would like to assist in preserving this treasure for future generations." Alice felt a sense of relief. The arrival of the experts meant that the treasure would be well taken care of. She and Makena showed them the artifacts and shared the knowledge they had gathered. Over the next few months, the village of Kijiji became a center of historical research and preservation. The once abandoned temple was restored, and a small museum was built to house the artifacts. Visitors from all over came to learn about the rich history and heritage of Kijiji. Alice found herself at peace. She had never imagined her life taking such a turn, but she was grateful for the journey. She had discovered not only the hidden treasures of her land, but also her own inner strength and the power of community. One afternoon, as Alice sat under the shade of the baobab tree where her adventure had begun, Makena joined her. "You know, we never did find out who those masked men were working for," Makena said, a hint of curiosity in her voice. Alice smiled. "Perhaps it's a mystery for another time," she replied. "For now, I'm just grateful for everything we've achieved." Makena nodded in agreement. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Alice looked out at the bustling village, now thriving with activity and pride. "Yes, we have. And there's still so much more to discover." As the sun set over the hills of Kijiji, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, Alice felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The unexpected journey had changed her life in ways she could never have imagined. And though the adventure had come to an end, she knew that the spirit of discovery and the bonds she had formed would last a lifetime. And so, Alice's story became a part of the rich tapestry of Kijiji's history, a tale of courage, unity, and the enduring power of heritage. The treasure they had protected was not just gold and jewels, but the legacy of their ancestors and the promise of a brighter future for generations to come.